Okay.
Okay.
So thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. I'm Alexa. All of you guys know who I am and who the stream team is, and our great Grays Harbor County Marine Resource Committee has helped us be able to put these on. Our original plan was to have these in person, and I will be applying for more funding to be able to have in-person talks in the future through the MRC. But Liz from Surfrider has joined us this evening to present about Mola, her presentation on Mola Madness, and I'm super excited because Liz is like the funniest person alive, and I'm really excited. So send it, Liz.
Sending it. Can you guys see my slide or my notes slide?
Your slide.
All right, cool. Somebody once was like, yeah, when your note slide pops up, it's like being caught in your underwear. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly how it feels. It's like, oh, not my crazy notes. All right. Anyway, so yeah, so super excited to be here. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It's a pretty sunny day, maybe too sunny. So thank you for spending it on a screen with us. Very excited. So by day, so again, my name is Liz Schotman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Washington Regional Manager for the Surfrider Foundation by day, and collector of weird fish facts by night. For those of you unfamiliar, Surfrider is a nonprofit, volunteer-run grassroots network, and we work on lots of coastal conservation issues like clean water and plastic pollution and climate change. And here in Washington, we have 5 chapters located around the Puget Sound. So I did want to plug that because they're the ones who pay me to do these things. And if you want to learn more information, you can go to surfrider.org, or about the Washington work that we do here, you can go to washington.surfrider.org. And we partner with amazing people like Stream Team and Twin Harbors Waterkeepers to do good work. So, but this is all about fun. So let me there we go. All right, so the ocean is full of mystery and really cool critters, which we're gonna talk about. But when you hear the phrase, really cool ocean critter, what, pray tell, comes to mind? Well, if you live up here, your first thought might be the orca, apex predator and symbol of the Pacific Northwest. Each pod has its own distinct culture, different language, different prey, different behaviors unique to their families. And they have matriarchal societies where the women kind of run the show, which I'm just saying, maybe we should give it a try. The men in charge have kind of botched things, just throwing it out there as an idea. Or maybe, like me, you spent most of your childhood obsessing over Shark Week, in which case perhaps your first thought was the great white shark, another apex predator simultaneously feared and revered around the world, dominating the deep almost as much as it dominates Shark Week, which I take issue with because there's lots of other good sharks out there. Or maybe if you're into doom scrolling about climate change, I feel ya, in which case you might have thought polar bear, the symbol of melting ice caps and unwilling spokes animal for Coca-Cola. So these deceptively adorable danger floofs are actually classified as marine mammals since they spend so much time out at sea. Or one of my personal favorites, the whale shark, just stunningly beautiful and stunningly huge. These guys get up to 65 feet long and weigh over 75,000 pounds. And they're mysterious in a lot of ways. Like, we don't know where they go to breed. We think they live like 100, 150 years. And each one is a unique and beautiful snowflake. You can identify them by the individual patterns on their spots.
It's not that bad.
Or manta rays, the most majestic of the sea flaps, the graceful dancer of the deep. These guys are often seen doing somersaults backwards when they're feeding, because why wouldn't you when you're this just fantastical flying pancake with a scoopy shovel face? So these guys have a wingspan of up to 30 feet, which is like 2 Toyota Camrys back to back. And fun fact, they have the largest brain of any fish. One recent study showed that they can actually recognize themselves in a mirror, which is just crazy. So that's something that only like elephants and chimps and dolphins can do at this point that we know of. And of course, the most mega of the megafauna, the blue whale. So this is literally the largest animal on Earth ever, including dinosaurs. The record one we have is 109 feet. They probably get even bigger, but it's just hard to confirm that since we've been whaling a lot longer than we've been sciencing. And fun fact, so these mamma jammas can communicate across entire ocean basins, Also, their tongue is the size of an elephant, and you could swim through its aorta, which is both fascinating and kind of creepy. I could literally go on for hours, but you get the idea. All of these cool critters are what we call charismatic megafauna, which is your science word of the day. This definition here, courtesy of Wikipedia, what every serious scientist uses daily, but doesn't admit to. So charismatic megafauna tend to be large, far roaming, and a lot of them are top predators or keystone species. Many are what we call umbrella species, because if you protect them, you need to protect big areas of habitat and critical ecosystem functions. And in doing so, you protect that habitat for everything underneath them. So all the other species that make up that ecological community. So it's not a scientific category so much as a conservation action term. And on land, you have like your tigers and your panda bears, and of course your elephants, which are awesome. But they all share, and your giraffes and everything else you guys said, and the giant ground sloths would have counted if they were still in existence. But they all share similar characteristics. They're big, they're beautiful, they're sexy, they're just all around photogenic. They're like the influencers of the ocean realm, if you will. And then there's this. So it's easy to think that all the species that exist in the world are like the results of millions of years of evolution, just the unforgiving forces of natural selection, ruthlessly choosing only the most useful, well-adapted traits. That the animals we see are just these like finely tuned machines perfectly matched to their environment. But every now and then you see a creature that probably just shouldn't be, and you can't help but think, go home evolution, you're drunk. So I present to you the Mola, also known as the ocean sunfish. In other languages, they're known as moonfish, headfish, or a swimming head. And in Taiwanese, its name apparently translates to the fish that looks like a toppled car, which I find to be just so delightful. So what are these derpy chunks floating around out there? Sorry about that. So let's talk taxonomy. So humans love to create order out of chaos. We just love organizing things and lumping them into categories. And when we're talking about animals, we refer to this as taxonomy, the science of how we name and classify critters. It used to be based on what they look like, but that's not the best way since nature is tricksy like a hobbit and is full of confusing shenanigans and shady lookalikes. So nowadays we use genetics to trace the evolutionary lineage of things. So Molas are in the kingdom Animalia with other animals, the phylum Chordata with all of us vertebrates, the class Osteichthyes, which is all the bony fish like your salmon and your rockfish, and the order Tetraodontiformes, which includes this lovable bunch of weirdos pictured here, like pufferfish, filefish, sugarfish, etc. Molids are actually considered highly derived or advanced from a taxonomic standpoint because they're actually one of the newer additions to the animal kingdom. So they've got some new features, sort of like the iPhone XYZ or whatever we're at now. So they evolved more recently than other fish species that we know about. It gets its name Mola from an old Swedish dude named Carl Linnaeus, considered the father of taxonomy. So he's like the OG OCD critter science nerd. And he thought they looked like a millstone, which is the archaic device pictured here. So Mola is Latin for millstone. And this is probably how he saw them, just big gray slabs laying around on shore or on the deck of a boat dead, since snorkeling hadn't quite taken off yet in the early 1700s. So we currently know of 5 living species of mola. We have the common sunfish, the mola, the giant or bumhead sunfish, which is now Mola alexandri, the sharp tail, which is more tropical, not much of a sunbather, that one. And then the slender, which is this little nugget at the bottom. These guys only get like 3.5 feet long and they're a little bit more elusive. And we have a recent addition to the molid family, and that is the newly discovered hoodwinker mola. And it got this not so sciencey sounding name because it's been hiding in plain sight for over a century. So it's hoodwinked all the fish nerds out there. It was only officially discovered a few years ago because we just assumed it was a common mola until we dug into the genetics of it. And I don't know about y'all, but I think it's just so exciting that there is a new species of giant lovable weirdo in the world. And what's also exciting is that there are probably more of them out there just derping about, waiting to be discovered and hopefully named something appropriately absurd. Because like I said, the ocean is vast and mysterious. So where are the molas at? Well, you see them throughout tropical and temperate oceans of the world. They'll stray into some colder waters, but they don't seem to enjoy the really cold water so much, which is just one of the many ways I feel really connected to these fish on a deep level. I love this mola graphic because the molas are just so happy and smiley but you can see some differences in their ranges pictured in the green here. So you have your common Molas a little bit farther north. Your bumphead is sort of all over, just bumpheading about. And originally we thought the hoodwinker hung out mostly in the southern oceans, since that's where we first found them. But now we know what to look for. We're seeing them turn up further and further north. And in fact, just over a year ago, we found them for the first time off of our coast, of the US Pacific coast. And so there's actually ongoing research to collect more sighting data. We currently haven't documented any off of Washington's coast, but we've seen them north of us and we've seen them south of us. So we know they're out there. So if you see a sunfish, say something. They're actually, for real, there's scientists that want you to holler at them if you see a sunfish. So this map pictured on the left here is part of a global ocean sunfish sighting database that you can report sightings to. There's some links at the bottom that we can share at the end of this with notes and stuff, or you can email them at oceansunfishresearch@gmail.com, and you too can be a Mola mad scientist. So what is a Mola made of? Well, a whole bunch of meat, like 5,000 pounds of it. So that's like a rhino or like a Chevy Silverado. And they probably get bigger, especially the ladies, which tend to be a little huskier than most males. Another reason I feel like these are kindred spirits. It makes them the heaviest bony fish in the world. I did mention the whale shark, which is bigger and heavier, but it's a shark, so it has a cartilage skeleton, so it doesn't count. And all that meat is covered in incredibly thick, tough skin, which can be up to 6 inches thick in some places. And I've heard it compares to 36 grit sandpaper that's also covered in a very thick slime. So if that doesn't make you just want to reach out and pet one, I don't know if we can be friends. It's likely that their size and thick skin are their primary defense, since there's just not a lot of things out there that can take a bite out of this big old chunk pictured here. Except maybe a megalodon, which is what you get if like you put together like 4 or 5 fully grown great white sharks and like Voltron themselves into one big nightmare shark. But luckily megalodons are extinct, or so we think. Part of me hopes that they're still out there. So the Mola Award #1 goes to them for being the heaviest bony fish in the world. And to support all of that thick meat and skin, they have bones, right? Because they're bony fish, but they've actually kind of backtracked a bit, evolutionarily speaking, and re-evolved a lot of cartilage. So like I said, they're one of the newer species of fish swimming around out there. So they're highly derived, AKA super advanced, obviously. So it's possible that they have more cartilage because they don't actually have a swim bladder, which is the inflatable organ that a lot of fish use to control their buoyancy. Cartilage is lighter and more flexible than bone, so it's easier to get away with not having a floaty sac. We recently discovered that the babies actually do have a swim bladder, but they lose it when they get older. I don't know why. Probably because the adults make repeated deep dives when they feed, and you don't want an air-filled sac causing pressure change problems every time you go down for a snack. So they were like, yeah, we don't need all these bones, and also we'll pass on a tail, which seems an odd choice since the vast majority of fishes have a caudal fin or tail fin that they use to propel themselves quite effectively. Have you ever caught a fish with your bare hands? Probably not one with a tail. But these derps were like, how about instead of a tail, we grow this useless clavis, which is what you call this weird little pseudo tail nubbin thing that doesn't really seem to have a purpose or use whatsoever. So they've opted out of a perfectly good tail, and instead they move by flapping their dorsal and anal fins, sort of like a bird flapping its wings, but way more awkward. Again, it's like they know me. In addition to ditching their tail, or because of it, they actually have fewer vertebrae than any other fish. So they only have 16. Humans, by comparison, have 33. And fun fact, giraffes, which is a favorite animal, also they have the same number of neck vertebrae as humans. Just random fun fact. I just think that's crazy. They're just really big and long. And all of the Mola's vertebrae are located within their brain case. So they are, in fact, a swimming head. They also have a bunch of other weird modifications, kind of like that first car you owned before you realized you would probably need to resell it one day. They have reduced sensory systems, so they have tiny ear bones and tiny nostrils and a weird lateral line, weird scales that are branched and unique, and huge supersized kidneys, which is fun. Their gills are weird, and they also have really big hearts, probably to push blood through their big weird gills. So the second Mola Award is for having the fewest vertebrae and a bunch of other weird structures we've never seen before, but nobody really cares about unless you're like a super fish nerd. Oh yeah, and their teeth are fused into a beak-like structure that prevents them from closing their mouths, giving them, and this is arguably my favorite descriptive animal quote from the internet, a meme-worthy look of confused alarm. Liz, you might ask, can they eat with that ineffectual looking non-bitey beaky thing? Yes, of course. And I know you don't believe me. I didn't believe it at first myself. So I do have video proof that they are in fact capable of putting foodstuffs into their weird face holes, which they do by sucking in water with their food and then spitting the water back out. So not the best table manners, which of course I relate to. So I'm going to show you this brief video. And this is one of my favorite videos of all time. And I think this is a captive mola in Japan. And so he can't really close his mouth, but he'll just suck that squid right up in his big face. Oh my God, that face. Oh, they're the cutest thing. I love them. All right. Back to molas. Do we have oh, no, thank you. You put that in the chat. And I'm fine if you all want to unmute yourselves and ask questions at any point, by the by. All right. So these guys are far roaming, structurally very weird, and come from a weird family. So it's probably not surprising that their lives are equally odd. So these guys start their life as tiny planktonic peas covered in spikes. And I mean like tiny, like less than a millimeter tiny. And then from what we can tell, they grow pretty quickly into this husky blimp lump pictured here on the right. Oops. We don't know exactly how quickly they grow, but we know one in Monterey Bay Aquarium grew like 800 pounds in a little over a year, and it got too big for the tank and had to be airlifted out via helicopter, which I would give almost anything to go back in time with some popcorn and a lawn chair and just watch, because that just sounds fantastic. At some point between those stages, there are these little palm-sized little pancakes pictured in the middle here. And we don't really see them very often. The one pictured here is actually a slender mola, so the three pictures are three different species because I'm all about accuracy here. But the fact that we don't see those little teenagers is another indication that they probably just grow really fast, which makes sense because in the ocean, that it behooves you to grow big fast because the bigger you are, the fewer things can fit you in their mouths. So the juveniles tend to school for safety, which I'm going to show a little video of. And once they get big enough to be less bite-sized and not so universally delicious, they seem to be pretty solitary, which has been true for me as well. I used to be so social, and I'm just old curmudgeon, giving lectures in my PJs through the internet. But I do have a picture of some baby molas with some excellent audio.
Oh my God. Holy guacamole. Look at these guys. Holy guacamole. Holy guacamole.
I don't know who that person is, but I think we should be best friends. Holy guacamole, indeed. Ah, so tiny. I would be doing a cannonball into that water for sure. So we don't know how long they live for sure. Probably at least 15, 20 years. Some in captivity have lived at least 10. It could be over 100. So we just don't know. I like to think of them as timeless though. And just to emphasize how completely ridiculous their growth is, to turn from these tiny peas into this massive hunk of meat requires increasing their size 60 million times. So that's like the human baby becoming the size of 6 Titanics, like the big ship. So Mola War number 3 is having the largest growth of any vertebrate. And to give you an idea of just how truly chonky they are, I have this really poor, shaky video of a really big one next to some divers that just gives you some good perspective on just how absurdly huge they are. So this on the bottom right, hopefully you can see, is a diver. He's a little bit behind in the background, but you just see this thing is massive, just so massive. I'm guessing that's a bump head. I'm not entirely sure. And I'll talk about it in a little bit, but all these little weird bumpy things on it are likely parasites because they are known for being covered in parasites. That's just a thing. All right. Moving along. And with great size comes great fecundity. This is your second or 14th science word of the day. So it basically means the number of eggs a female produces. And that brings us to our fourth Mola award, is the most fecund. How fecund, you might ask? One female was found to have 300 million eggs in her ovary. By comparison, your average salmon lays around like 5,000 and then it dies. So these chonky babes crank out hundreds of millions of eggs at a time. Like many fish, they have external fertilization and reproduce by what's called broadcast spawning. So males and females eject their gametes, their eggs and sperm, out into the water column in a joyous celebration of life where they mix together so the eggs are fertilized and then drift around on the currents. We don't actually find their eggs very often because it's like tiny little adorable needles in an endless haystack of the empty ocean. And we have what I consider to be just a really disappointing understanding of their sex lives. So in summary, we know where they are, we know what they're made of, they have an unacceptably vague idea about what their sex life is like, but what do molas do? What's a day in the life of a mola really like? This is a question I ask myself more often than would probably be recommended by a doctor. So they spend a lot of time eating all sorts of things, but a lot of gooey stuff. So we find things in their bellies like squids and sponges and eelgrass and little crabs and even small fishes. And we can tell from these gut content analyses that they're feeding at the surface, in the water column, and at the bottom. So they're not picky eaters. Hashtag molas are my soul critter. We also know that their diets tend to shift from small crustaceans and crunchy snacks to gelatinous zooplankton. So your jellies, your salps, your ctenophores, as they get bigger. And there's not a lot of nutrients in a jellyfish, surprisingly. So they're probably pretty voracious predators, just out there slurping up jellies left and right. And with climate change, we're seeing increasing numbers of jellyfish swarms, which are called a smack. And in some places, the jellies are replacing other more valuable species. So I like to think of molas as our first line of defense against the encroaching jelly hordes. Molas will save us all. You heard it here first. We also know from tagging studies that they spend a lot of time diving. So they can get down at least 3,000 feet or more, but they seem to enjoy hanging out just below the thermocline, excuse me, which is where warm surface water meets cold water of the deep. And there a lot of planktonic and drifting life forms get concentrated there, usually around 200 to 600 feet. So the molas like to hang out there since that's where the snacks are, sort of like chilling on the sidewalk in front of your local corner store. It's where the cool kids are. It's where you go to get treats. And you wouldn't know it for looking at them, but these blimpy bumpkins can actually launch their meaty bodies like 10 feet in the air. So there are anecdotes of them jumping into boats, which makes me want to move on to a boat. And since I know it's hard, nigh on impossible to imagine such a beast being able to reach the necessary velocity to break the surface, I found a couple videos of them breaching from above and below. So I'm going to show you some of these videos. You see a little guy gaining speed. Whoop. That's it. Audio of this, I think I had it on mute, but it's like, have you ever seen a baby mola breach? It's like, no, we have. And then this is not great video, but it's from below and it's a much bigger one. So you can see how they sort of propel themselves like a bird flapping. And so he's gaining speed and he launches himself out of the water and he lands. So why do they do that? Most people believe, well, I like to think it's a spontaneous manifestation of their own internalized sense of beauty and self-love, but scientists say it's to remove parasites, which, as I mentioned, they have a lot of. Is this also something I share with molas? Maybe. A lady never tells. Moving on. Over 50 species of parasites have been found on these filthy beauties, and since they don't have hands, they need help getting them off. And one way is by jumping and sort of smacking down really hard on the water, like a sideways belly flap, but they will also team up with fellow beasts like fish and birds and allow their tiny friends to rip all the tasty worms and parasitic copepods and such from their flesh, because what are friends for? So the image here is a picture of a mola at a feeding station on a reef. And so these little fish are enjoying a nice buffet, just having a great day. And sometimes they even let us lend a hand. And here's some more YouTube videos of people, other people, living my dream. And so this is a Mola. And you can see all of these little like lines on his head. Those are parasitic copepods and other kind of parasites. And this mole is like, yo, my face itches. Help a fish out. Scratch my face. And he's just gently nagging, asking for some face scratchings. With his mouth that won't close. And then this one has a little bit of audio, but it's educational. So I'll just press play.
And I came to see blue and mako sharks with pelagic expeditions, but we had a little surprise of a mola showing up, and it was hanging out at the surface, sunning itself. And the captain let us know that sometimes while they sun themselves, they let the birds come down and pick parasites off of them. So maybe we would have a chance to hang out with it and even pick some parasites off of it ourselves. Eric's drone kept sight of it for us as we swam over to it. And sure enough, we got to act as human cleaning stations today and pick some copepods off of the skin of this guy.
How cool was that? Rotate, let's see, you got, oh yeah, you got pretty covered on the back.
Yeah, so hopefully, I hope we all can act as cleaning stations one day. Keep the dream alive. If a mola just came up to me and wanted scritchings, then just make my life. So like me, molas also love the company of birds. And like that video mentioned, they will bask at the surface to let those birds sort of munch off itchy parasites, but also because sunfish love sunshine, #SoulCritter. So they spend a lot of time basking, and we're pretty sure it's because they need to warm up because of all those dyes down below the thermocline. So it's called thermal recharging, which is something I do every winter when I visit my family in Florida. We're pretty sure of this because of several tagging studies that show that the longer they hang out in those cold waters at depth, the longer they'll sort of loiter at the surface, sort of like us Washingtonians emerging from the depths of the gray winter and spending as much time as we can burning ourselves in early spring sunshine. We also know that some sunfish will migrate into warmer latitudes in the winter, and the ones that do spend less time basking than the ones that stay in those colder, higher latitudes or lower latitudes. Also, this behavior might explain why they look the way they do. Well, not like they're meme-worthy faces, but they're humongous pancakery, because being big helps you maintain thermal momentum. So you lose heat more slowly when you're really big. And being a big pancake lets you warm up more quickly when you laze around on the surface, like a big meaty solar panel. So like I said, they're the epitome of evolution. Despite being supremely adapted to their environment, life as a mola is not without its hazards. I found this quote from a sailor that apparently crashed into molas 3 times in 1 year, which is probably just as bad for the boat as it was for the mola, because it's like crashing your sailboat into a Silverado. But part of me is like, maybe he's a bad pilot. I'm just saying, at some point you got to wonder if like maybe it's you if you keep hitting them. I don't know. I shouldn't judge. So how are molas doing these days? And what kind of threats do they face? Well, they aren't winning any races. I couldn't find a good estimate what their top speeds are. It's probably like a couple miles an hour, maybe 5, I don't know. But it's not fast enough to get out of the way of sailboats, apparently. And they can also get sucked into large ship propellers. I couldn't kind of find a free picture of a mola that's been hit by a boat, but this is what he would look like afterwards, laying on the seafloor. And the ocean is just chock full of things that love to eat each other. And while few things can take on a full-grown mola, like maybe some orcas or some big sharks, the juveniles are definitely susceptible to predation. So sea lions have been seen biting off their fins and basically disabling them and then batting them around and eventually letting them sink to the floor and slowly die, because sea lions are jerks and you can't convince me otherwise. There's actually a video of this if you go on YouTube. I'm not going to show it because it makes me sad. And obviously some, not all, but some people suck when it comes to respecting wildlife. So this guy decided to ride this mola, which is my one true life goal. And I'd like to think I'd restrain myself if given the opportunity, but no promises. I will say though, that you ride a mola at your own risk. So remember, these guys are covered in parasites, like grotesquely so. And apparently this individual had a bunch of parasitic copepods on his nether bits after this incident. So just saying, don't be this guy unless you want parasitic copepods on your junk. But by far the biggest threat to them is commercial fisheries. So molas will get hooked on long lines and get caught in nets to a pretty alarming extent. Just a few of the numbers I found were pretty sobering. So in South Africa, they apparently catch like 340,000 a year as bycatch. Here on our own coast, molas apparently make up 30% of what the California swordfish fishery catches, which means they catch more molas than they do swordfish, apparently. PSA, just don't eat a lot of swordfish. It's not good for them. And there is a market for them, mostly in Asia, where people do eat them, like on purpose. And of course, no Surfrider ocean presentation is complete without the mention of the universal threat of plastic pollution to all life on Earth. So molas eat what's floating around in the sea, and as we all know, more and more of what's floating out there is plastic. So if we don't turn off the tap and stop overfishing, then at some point in the near future, there will be more plastic than fish out there. One study found microplastics in the stomach of almost 80% of the molids that they sampled, which is why things like our recent bag ban and passage of our plastic recycling bill here in Washington, SB 5022, are really important and have impacts beyond our own beaches and waterways. So join Surfrider today, and Stream Team, and Twin Harbor Waterkeepers. So the answer to the question of how molas are doing these days is we don't really know. The IUCN, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is the organization that lists species around the world as endangered and vulnerable, etc. They list the common mola as vulnerable and decreasing, most likely due to being killed as bycatch in fisheries around the world. But the other 4 species, we just don't have sufficient data to say, which is why the community science reporting that I mentioned earlier through Mer Society and oceansunfishresearch.org are so important, because these amazing goofballs could need our help and we wouldn't even know. And why wouldn't we help them? They are objectively one of the most endearing, if not sexy, kinds of megafauna in the sea. And early research shows that they love snacks and smooches. That's a lie. We have not empirically demonstrated that they love snacks and smooches, but we haven't proven that they don't either, since we know so little about them. So a quick review of the Mola wards. They are the heaviest bony fish, excluding sharks and rays, with the fewest vertebrae, but the most eggs, and they grow real fast, or big, I should say. Better than anything else with a spine. So the Mola, as unsexy as it might be, still deserves its place among the charismatic megafauna of the sea. And I found this image of a series of stamps, and it sparked so much joy in my cold dead heart, because you have these super charismatic species. You have the whale shark, the oceanic white tip, a manta ray, these sleek, stripy billfish, and they're hidden in plain sight, this just lumpy derp right in the middle with all the other charismatic megafauna, where, and I hope you now agree, it deserves to be. I don't want to be specious, so I do want to spend a little bit of time giving some love to similarly under-recognized, but no less deserving, uncharismatic megafauna. So we spent a lot of time talking about how molas are the heaviest bony fish, but I wanted to show you the longest bony fish in the world, the oarfish. So this is a bizarre denizen of the deep that we only get very rare glimpses of. The longest recorded specimen is like 26 feet. There's some unconfirmed reports of them being up to 56 feet long. And since most of the pictures you see of these lovely slender sea peacocks are of them washed up dead, I hunted down some footage of a guy diving with one at night. And it's just so shiny and so weirdly vertical. And I really feel a connection with this diver, because he's nerding out so hard and is like, whoa, look at this thing. This is amazing. I got to touch it. Oh my God, I touched it. So I'm going to show you this video because it delights me. Thank you, Animal Planet.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. All people have seen the Earth's face. Look at that outlandish looking thing. I won't even touch it. I actually touched it.
Even so close, it's hard to judge its length, but
Yeah, that would be me. Oh my God, I touched it. So cool. And because 2020 wasn't enough and we all need more nightmare fodder in our lives, I present to you the Bathynomus, the giant deep sea isopod. So these are essentially giant carnivorous pill bugs that live in the deep, dark abyss, and they can get over 2.5 feet long and have not one, not two, but 4 sets of jaws. And so they live in a constant state of semi-hibernation because life is slow and boring down there, and apparently have the largest eggs of any invertebrate because it's not nightmarish enough to have a giant pill bug that lives in the darkest corners of the earth and eats meat. We needed to have a horrific sized spawn as well. We used to think they were mostly scavengers, but apparently they kill sharks. And I hear you, no, Liz, that just can't be. But you're wrong, it can, because the ocean is rad and terrifying. So here you go, courtesy of the internet, a really grainy image of a giant pill bug eating a shark. So there's a little shark swimming around here, and it's really hard to see, but hopefully you can tell that there is a giant pill bug of death grappling with this shark. Awesome. Giant isopods. And I worked in fisheries, and they smell like burnt tires. Fun fact, when you pull them out of the deep ocean. Closer to home, we have the lion's mane jelly, which you can find right here in the Puget Sound, but usually not this big. You'll see this image with like a photoshopped tiny diver next to it, which is a total deep fake. Get it? Deep sea fake? Sorry, not sorry. But they do get over 6 feet in diameter, and they have tentacles over 120 feet long, which is actually longer than our blue whale. So our little lion's mane jellyfish is actually the largest one in the world, which is awesome. It will sting. I don't believe it's usually fatal unless you're just so unlucky and have a bad reaction to it, or somehow manage to expertly wind all 120 feet of tentacle around your body like a sad, sad marionette. And I'm sure you've all heard of the giant squid, which gets all the love. And I believe it's the longest, pictured here at the bottom. But since we are here to celebrate the Mola's huskiness, we shall likewise celebrate this champion of cephalopods weighing in at over 1,000 pounds, the colossal squid. So it is the largest invertebrate in the world, and it has the biggest eyes of any creature on Earth. Oh. But it hangs out in the southern colder oceans, so we just don't run into it as often as the giant squid, which we also don't run into very often. And these guys battle sperm whales, and I hope I live to see the day when we can stick like a GoPro on a sperm whale's face and watch said battle unfold. I would love that so much. Did you want a giant squid nightmare to add to your Bathanomas dreams? Well, I live to serve. So researchers built this underwater platform with lights to lure big squids in so we could get some better pics of them. I presume for the gram, maybe TikTok. I'm not gonna lie, on a scale of like 1 to 10 heebie-jeebies, I'm gonna give this video like a 6, maybe a 7 if I'm watching it alone at night or while swimming. And so this like thing here is like a light device, and you think it's a tentacle, and then it becomes a whole bunch of tentacles. So this is what you would see as the last thing before a giant squid ate you. And then it just disappears. It's like, I can't eat that. Just terrifying. But thank you, science, for giving us nightmares. Far less mobile or scary, but arguably more beautiful, we have Tridacna gigas, the giant clam. It can get over 6 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, and they probably live well over 100 years if some jerk doesn't kill them for their shell. They have symbiotic algae, kind of like coral, that give them these beautiful trippy colors like purple, blue, and pink. And they're just wonderful. I love them. They're like a big stone couch that just hangs out and filters water and is covered in magic eye posters from the early 90s. And then we have the giant pyrosome, which looks like a big old rice noodle, but is actually a pelagic tunicate, which is a primitive filter feeding organism. So these big old sea noodles can get over 60 feet long. And of course, because the ocean is red, it glows in the dark. So cool. Although I'm not gonna lie, if I stumbled on one of these, I might freak out and if I didn't know what it was. Or maybe I'd just ride it like this person. Don't be that person. Just don't be that guy. It could be a woman, I don't know, but let's be real. It's probably a guy. And finally, I wanted to end with the sponge, since sponges deserve our love for so many reasons. For one, they're just so weird. First off, they've been around for like 500 million years. So they're basically the most primitive animal on Earth. And they're they're so basic, they don't have specialized tissues. So apparently you can just blend one up and all those cells will just bloop, turn themselves back into a sponge somehow. So they're basically like made of stem cells, which is probably why they can live over 2,000 years. They have skeletons made of glass, which is neat. Also, don't eat them. And they filter the ever-loving bejesus out of the water. I read one estimate that the sponges in the Caribbean can filter all of the water in the Caribbean Sea in one day, which is just nuts. Like, that's bananas. The world's largest used to be the Caribbean giant barrel sponge, pictured here, but researchers recently discovered a new, bigger sponge in Hawaii's Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, which is pictured here on the bottom in all its weird, lumpy, weird ghost-likeness. It is 12 feet long and 7 feet high, so it apparently took the title away from my beloved barrel sponges for now, but I'm still rooting for the barrels because I like to picture myself relaxing in one after a long day, but I wouldn't because it's not cool. For the record, please don't sit on animals in the ocean. Just don't. It's not good for them, and there's a very good chance it's not going to be good for you. And because I love videos of science nerds just freaking out about things they find in the sea. Here's a final video of them stumbling upon the world's largest sponge in Hawaii.
My goodness, where did this guy come from? Holy cow.
Wow. That is unbelievable.
Oh, geez.
That's amazing.
So we sampled this a couple days ago, and I'm trying to figure out what it is right now. And I don't know, just from the spicules, but holy guacamole here.
He said it wrong. It's holy guacamole, but we will forgive him for that. Oh, and here's the giant pyrosome if you wanted. This is a pretty poor video, but you can get a feel for this person's just booping it, giving a little squeeze, grabbing its little tail. Doesn't actually have a tail. The whole thing is just a noodle, but pretty trippy. If you just stumbled upon that, I'd be like, is this the egg sac of a giant bug that I should be aware of? So just very strange. The ocean is just full of weirdness. And don't be that guy. So we made it. So back to molas. If you're like me and you're now obsessed with these deep diving derps, there are a few resources I can recommend. You can report sightings like we mentioned, because knowing is half the battle. You can adopt a sunfish, where donations go to supporting sunfish research. Apparently, if you donate a lot of money, you can go out on the sunfish research boat. So my parents or anybody wants to spend a couple, I think it's like $10,000 or $20,000, but if I had that, that's what I would spend my money on. I recently crashed the virtual Ocean Sunfish Symposium, which is all available on YouTube and just full of wonderful Mola obsessed nerds from all over the world. I also stumbled on the Mola fan club, which seems to be a hodgepodge group of fellow Moladites, Molamaniacs, Molologists. I don't know what to call my people. I'm open to suggestions, but this seems to be the place to show off your new Mola tattoo, which, mark my words, I will share when, not if it happens. And finally, if you have great pictures of molas, please upload them to Unsplash or Flickr or some free image thing. All the cool pictures I had in the beginning of like sharks and whales and orcas, they were all free images online because they're charismatic megafauna that people love. And so people post free pictures of them. I had a heck of a time hunting down uncopyrighted images of molas, which is just another frustrating example of species discrimination. So with that, this concludes my long and rambling Sunfish Love Fest. I hope you leave with a newfound appreciation of these endearingly awkward, flappy sea pancakes, and that you are able to take some life lessons with you. So live life like a mola, dive deep, explore your world, seek out the sun, especially here in Washington, but maybe not this weekend. Roam far and wide, go with the flow, never stop growing, and don't be afraid to be yourself. Even if you have a perpetual meme-worthy look of confused alarm, or you feel like your body is put together wrong, you are supremely adapted to this universe, and I appreciate you. So, that is it.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was amazing. I think I learned so much, and I bet we all did. Do you guys have any questions for Liz?
I love questions.
Yeah, I do. Liz, so you said that they eat these in Asia? So there's nobody in, there's no market for all that bycatch?
No, not I'm aware of. The seafood industry is ripe with mislabeling, and so maybe we've all had it and we don't know. Like that's possible. But as far as I know, there's no real market for it here. But I believe there is some in Asia. I don't know which Asian countries really like to eat them. There's also some, what I think is misinformation, that they're mildly, like they're toxic to eat. I couldn't find any confirmation of that in the literature. I think because they're in Tetrodontiformes, which has puffer fish, which can be like some of them can be toxic to eat. So I think that's where that might have come from. But yeah, I couldn't verify that they have any sort of toxic.
So Liz,
Yeah.
holy guacamole.
Holy guacamole.
Great Mola presentation. Thanks so much. How far with sightings have one or more of this group of fish come into the Puget Sound?
That's a great question. I don't know numbers, but I have heard like plenty of anecdotes. They don't, from what I can tell, they don't seem to end up in shallower waters like the Puget Sound unless they're like probably sick or not doing so well. Because like I said, they like to feed at depth. So they're not, if they're in shallow water, like less than like 200 feet, they're either moving from one place or another, or they're probably like kind of not feeling great. Maybe got hit by a boat, or they're sick, or their parasite load's too high. I don't know. But usually if you see them close to shore, they're washing up kind of deal. So
But what about Washington's coast then?
they're definitely out there on the coast. In fact, one of my volunteers, I gave the same presentation to the South Sound Surfrider chapter a while ago. And then last week she was like, I was on a boat and I saw a Mola. And I forget where she said she was. Maybe it's like off Port Townsend or something. I don't know. I don't remember, but they are off our coast. Definitely the common Molas and the bump heads. Not sure about the slender Molas range. And then the hoodwinker, we know they're there. Like I said, they've been spotted in Alaska and they've been spotted in California and maybe Oregon, but we just haven't spotted them. And the people working at the Mer Society are looking, because when I gave this presentation to the South Sound chapter, they just pulled like a random image of a Mola from the internet for like the advertisement. And then the Mer Society people saw it and they contacted us and they're like, did you take that picture? Where did you take that picture? I think that's a hoodwinker Mola. And so they were on it. So it's cool. They're like scouring the internet for like images to be like, is this a hoodwinker? Where did you get it? So pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about any sea creatures? I'll give it a whirl.
I was wondering, I think you may have said it, but how long it takes them from like the very beginning stage to when they're like full grown?
That is a great question. And I couldn't find like a verified, we don't know for sure, I don't think, because they're so hard to keep in captivity and we don't I don't know, I guess is the short answer. Probably like a decade, maybe less.
Yeah, I guess there would be no way to put like a tracker on them or anything like that because they're constantly growing.
Yeah, and they start out so small, and because they're just like this far roaming pelagic creature, it's hard to keep them in captivity. And I'll tell you a little story. Like, I'm obsessed, and I hadn't actually ever seen a Mola in real life for many years. And some friends and I did a trip to California. I'm from Florida, so we flew all the way to California. It was a big trip, and I was like, I'm renting a car, I'm buying all of you tickets, because like they weren't like aquarium people, and I'm like, I'm kidnapping you basically and taking you to the Monterey Bay Aquarium so that I can see a Mola. And we get there and I'm like, how's the Mola doing? And she's like, oh, we let it go like last week. And I'm like, what? And she's like, they get too big and apparently they don't do well in captivity because they're in the big tank with all the sharks and the tuna. I don't know if you've ever been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, but they have this giant open ocean tank that has like tuna and sharks and stuff. And they're not smart. And so in aquariums, and they're not mobile. So when it comes, like, aquariums will like teach fish to target train. So they'll be like, the Molas hit this like red ball on a stick. And so when you train them to do that, you can put food in front of them, and that's a way to guarantee that you're getting the food to all the different fish. Is sort of how a lot of aquariums will do it. And Molas apparently either aren't good at target training because they're not that smart, or they're just too slow. And so like the tuna like steal all their snacks kind of deal is how it was explained to me. They're like, yeah, they just don't do very well in captivity. They can't compete. So, but I did go back many years later and finally saw my Mola, and it was magical. Dreams really do come true. Y'all.
Why do you think they're not smart? Just
I think I read that they have smooth brains, and just like anecdotally, somebody that was at the aquarium was like, they're probably not that smart. I like to think they just are alternately intelligent, but they're not manta ray smart. They're not recognizing themselves in a mirror, probably. So
Has anybody ever given them the chance? No.
no, I bet they haven't. So I'll ask that at the next Ocean Sunfish Symposium.
I was wondering, do the oarfish stay directly up and down in the water? Is that why they're called oarfish?
I have no idea. That's a great question.
Because the person was swimming next to it, and it seemed to be like straight up and down.
Yeah, it was so weirdly vertical. I never seen that. And I'm gonna guess no, just because I think most of the ones that we've encountered are washed up dead on the shore, or they're like kind of dying. And I've seen some videos of like ones like about to die that kind of like swimming like a normal fish would,
Like a snake, yeah.
limping along. Yeah, like an eel. I don't know why I guess because they're long and skinny, or maybe there's some completely other reason why they're called that. But yeah, they're cool. And that guy was just like, I'm gonna touch it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I touched it.
So Liz, I need to go because there's a 9th grade soccer game starting soon. Thanks, Alexa, everyone, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. Bye, Lee. Bye.
So good to see you, Martin. Thanks for joining us.
You know, they tell you when you're diving, never to touch the fauna, never to touch the walls, never to touch the reefs. Matter of fact, a lot of tropical dive destinations will not permit you to wear gloves just to discourage you from touching things, because you're a lot more aware when your hands are uncovered.
Yeah, and a lot of those things will sting you. So you don't.
Yes, that's true too. And you can sting them as well, inadvertently, or maybe advertently. And back when my son and I used to dive, we dive off the coast of California mostly. And totally excited one day, we were finished our diving, we were coming back on the boat, and there was a mola in the water. And all of us were on board the boat.
Oh, was it a big one? How big was it?
It was an adult. You know, it was a little ways off, but it was enormous. And it was just below the surface. I think it was just either just finished sunning or about to start, because it was in the afternoon. And it was just astonishing, because never in a million years did it occur to me I would ever see one.
Yeah, I'm so happy for you and so jealous. I want that. I would jump off the boat. So
it was awesome. Yeah, we were moving, so probably not a good idea.
No, yeah. I would have been like, stop the boat. We're doing a second dive. It's real shallow. It's fine. We have the airport. I used to live in the Florida Keys, and I would go offshore fishing with like my friends. That was like our hobby. And I'd always be like, oh, I'll look for birds to see if, because birds will tell you where their fish is. And like the whole time I'm like, I'm looking for molas. And I always had like a mask, fins, and snorkel ready. And I was always prepared to like fling myself off a boat if I saw one, and it never happened.
If I'd been in the water with it, I totally would have touched it.
Oh yeah. I would have like asked permission in whatever way I could, like talking to it.
Excuse me, do you mind if I pick one of these critters off of you?
Exactly. They seem open to it. If it approaches you, like.
Besides, in California, we always dive with gloves. It's too cold otherwise.
Yeah, that's fair. That's awesome. I'm so glad you got to see one.
Yeah.
So cool.
They're often confused for sharks because their little dorsal fin will kind of breach the surface. And there's another video that's full of a lot of swear words, and it can be a little offensive, but so I didn't show it. But there's these two guys that like in New
Oh
Jersey.
my God, we would have been so offended.
I know. It's a great video. It's hilarious. It's these like two, I guess they're like New Jersey or Boston, I don't know. And they're like, bro, it's a baby whale, bro. We gotta call the aquarium or something. And then like minutes later, they're like, I think that's a tuna. There's a lot of good meat on that. Get that on board. And so they're like, they go through like, they have no idea what this fish is. They're freaking out. They go from like baby whale, it's sick, we have to save it. And then like 30 seconds later, they're like, get the gaff, get it on board. It's a tuna. It's like, no, it's hilarious. They're so blown away. They have no idea what this is. So that's a fun video, but it's a little more offensive, so I didn't show it. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Liz. That was
Yeah.
about the most entertaining presentation I've ever watched, I think. Thank you.
That's all I go for.
For sure.
Well, thanks for spending an hour in the evening on a screen and learning about my favorite fish. I hope you have appreciation for the awkward and beautiful out there now.
Definitely.
Thanks a lot. That was really neat. I read about them in a little book called Grayson by Lynn Fox. I just casually mentioned this gal is a long distance swimmer and she was practicing off the coast of California. And this mama whale left the baby with her. So she couldn't come back in and get out of the water because the baby whale was following her.
Oh, that's
Anyway.
amazing.
But she kept swimming out to where the sunfish were. What's a sunfish?
Yep.
Yeah, it was out by the derricks, the oil derricks, apparently.
Yeah, they sort of act like fish aggregators because it's structure. And so a lot of derelict oil rigs are actually great habitat and people love to fish and dive on them because it's structure. And any structure is going to be used out there in the middle of the ocean. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. I have now seen sunfish. Thank
There
you.
you go. You're welcome. Thank you for coming, asking good questions.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for showing up, and thank you so much, Liz. That was fabulous talk. I think I laughed almost the whole entire time, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening, you guys.
Yeah,
Have a great
cool.
evening.
Everybody, yes.
Stay cool.
I'll
Drink
post this.
electrolytes.
I'll post this video on the Great Harbor Stream Team Facebook page, and I'll send the link out in our email. So if you know anybody who would like to
Wonderful.
access it, you can share it
Yeah.
with them. Thank you. Have a nice
Great.
evening.
Bye.
You
Bye.
too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.